Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome, feminine leaders. I am super excited as we're beginning to share more of our Archetypal Apothecary rebranding this month. There is a whole piece about that I'll share in a sneak preview on social this week. And along with that, finally, I am delighted to announce that we're also beginning to host some transformational experiences again very soon, called Lunar Mystery Classes. I'll be leading you into full and new moon masterclasses to explore some of the common blocks that aspiring spiritual leaders hit up against in creating businesses from their gifts. The first one will be on the 20th of April and is all about how to heal spiritual leader burnout and create your business from alignment, integrity, and flow. For more information, sign up via our website www.nicolebarton.co.uk/mystery class. On The Secret Witch Show today, though, I am freestyling on the topic of Imposter Syndrome, the one block that often has aspiring feminine spiritual leaders procrastinating and distracting from their gifts. I explore the deeper ancestral wounds beyond not believing that success is deserved or created from your own skills. And I dive into why we can't judge our worth on other people, why the deep work to heal imposter syndrome is in cultivating our own worthiness, and how we can choose to expand into our spiritual gifts and approach that expansion like yin yoga for our business. Let's dive in. Welcome, spiritual leaders. I have been pondering recently how creating a spiritual business is literally an initiation. And it certainly felt that way for the last few years. It wasn't necessarily something I saw in the same way prior to that, although there were obviously challenges. It's felt like the deeper I've gone into my medicine, the more initiation I have had. And yeah, basically I've been reflecting on how business brings up all your stuff as material for liberation so that you can either choose to heal it and expand into it or not. And one of the things that it usually brings up is imposter syndrome. So that's why we thought we'd do an episode around that. It's the one you voted for in the Secret Witch Society. So here we are. And I'm excited to talk to this topic because it is one that most women who I serve will come up against. And really, when we talk about imposter syndrome, what we mean by that is not being able to believe that your success is deserved or created from your own skills and abilities. And I actually had to, I'll be honest, I had to Google imposter syndrome to directly understand exactly what we were speaking to. That's not to say I haven't suffered it, I just wasn't quite clear on exactly the meaning of it. So it's quite illuminating to do that because I can really see how that dynamic plays out in women that are here to create businesses and be spiritual leaders. So as I always do with each episode, just before I was recording, I was thinking about the archetypal remedy that I would serve if I was gathering all the women who have suffered with imposter syndrome into a room, which of course essentially is what I'm doing by leading this movement, is I would serve them with an archetypal remedy. And an archetypal remedy is essentially a mirror that will reflect these deeper aspects of ourselves so that we can see what's really going on beyond imposter syndrome and begin to reclaim our power. So I was thinking about it, and the remedy that came to mind was a remedy called aurum, which is gold. And gold really is a remedy for leaders, the leadership remedy. If you're thinking about an archetype out in the world that's already out there, you think of like the queen archetype. But it's like got broader depth to it than the queen. There's a lot of other things to it, but one of the things to it is imposter syndrome. And the people who suffer this particular aurum expression of imposter syndrome are people who are usually naturally talented. They're naturally gold in their expression, but they don't usually see that gold, and they have this relationship with failure as well. It's really a remedy of power, and it's the wound of power that they can often struggle with, but they are naturally gifted. You think about the archetypal story, or the mythological story of Icarus, and he tries to fly too close to the sun. And there's that whole kind of theme in aurum. And so, typically women who will suffer with aurum's expression of imposter syndrome are naturally talented, but don't really see that about themselves. So it's kind of the real definition of imposter syndrome, really. And when you add that particular wound to creating a business from your spiritual gifts, and you bring in the wound of magic, you're suddenly like, oh my God, are my magical gifts even real? So it's like a double hit of imposter syndrome. Not only are you having to back yourself in creating this business, but you're also essentially backing God or the goddess. And then you're like, shit, now I've got to believe that I can channel spirit, which you don't even have proof of, in order to create success. And you can see how that then has women get stuck in expressing their gifts into the world and kind of, owning that powerfully. You can see why so many women who feel the deep call to step into feminine spiritual leadership, to channel through their spiritual purpose, hit up against the block of imposter syndrome when they're starting out. And as they're journeying through, this is something that will hit women at all levels of creating a business. But particularly a spiritual business, you can see that is there. You can see why that appears to be something that is going to be present. And most women, I would say, that I've spoken to are at the point that they kind of walk towards this path, are really conscious that imposter syndrome is a block. How does that show up? Well, I've been chatting a lot to magical women recently about this, and they tend to experience it showing up in their business in the way that they, for a start, won't even allow themselves to dream often, because they think, who am I to even dream about being a leader in the spiritual realm? They will feel the fear of something not being good enough. So an offering that they put out there, they'll worry about that being good enough, whether they're serving people well enough in the offerings. She might presume that her gifts won't even help people. And she also has beliefs that, limited beliefs that she will fail. She'll not be able to serve. She feels unworthy. She doubts herself. There's this sense of feeling like a bit like they've gone back from being this corporate success story into being like a little bit of a baby of the industry. So where they were once they'd kind of navigated their way through imposter syndrome and reached the peak of their careers, only to find actually this isn't all that fulfilling. They're kind of almost going back to baby steps, back to, when you're almost starting out in this career and you feel that weight of imposter syndrome. And that's a great example, actually, because I think you can really see how that can be when we're starting something new and we can expand into our power. I'm going to speak to that a little bit more later, but other ways that this shows up is that feeling of being a baby in the industry. So not even allowing herself to step in and learn how to share her spiritual gifts. She can also doubt her leadership capacity, although she's been a leader in another kind of more mainstream thing. Leading a spiritual movement can also bring up that, can I really be that person to lead and manage all of that? like, can I really hold that level of power in this industry? And that throws up all sorts of questions like, am I really meant to do this? And also the classic of like, this is meant to be easier if it's aligned. I'm going to speak to that as well in a little while. And even, what if these big dreams aren't real? Who am I to teach? Why would anyone come to me? Essentially, the underlying deeper thing as well is, am I enough? Am I doing enough? Am I valuable enough? And am I really this miracle that I thought I was? Will I be able to deliver for my niche? What if people question me and say, you don't know what you're talking about? And then they also arrive at like, what's this all been for if I'm not enough? Ultimately, kind of leaves them spiraling in lacking confidence and feeling that they aren't deserving of creating an abundant spiritual business. And I'm very conscious of me saying like they here, because the reality is, all spiritual leaders, no matter where we're at, we all experience this imposter syndrome block, myself included. And I've done a lot of work with this particular shadow through my journey of leadership, spiritual leadership. And so this is kind of what positions me to really, really be able to speak to this from a place of like integrity. And one of the things I've seen over the years is that this block of imposter syndrome, all the ways that expresses that I've just gone through, these are really conscious for my women. Most of my women know about these blocks at the point where they come into the archetypal apothecary path. And in fact, these are literally examples of the things that women have said when they've shared with me. So they're kind of aware that this is imposter syndrome. And I think, firstly, let's celebrate the fact that you're not alone in this. Like, you are not the only one who is suffering from imposter syndrome. Because I know that's, again, you can always think like, it's just me, nobody else thinks that, they're just overnight success. But actually, people who are apparent overnight success have been working through imposter syndrome for probably 10 years before they are able to reach that overnight success. But the deeper thing is here, and this is something that is really, really important to see, and it's something that my entire teachings are centered around, is that imposter syndrome and really some of the other blocks that are more kind of surface blocks, imposter syndrome is really a surface personal manifestation of the deeper collective ancestral shadow wound of the witch wound, which is essentially, the witch wound is the doubt of your feminine power, your magic, and your full expression. Most of the blocks that women who are trying to create spiritual businesses experience are more conscious personal manifestations of an unconscious ancestral wound of the witch wound. So imposter syndrome is a block, but it's being created by a deeper underlying unconscious wound. And that is the real wound that wants healing. And that is so important to know, because what happens is women tend to get stuck in trying to fix or heal imposter syndrome, when no matter how hard they try to heal this block, they keep looping around and around and around it again, never really changing it or healing it or moving and expanding past into, we talked about it being a spiral, they never really move past where they are with imposter syndrome. And that's because really of this truth that the deeper wound is your feminine witch wound. If you are here to be a spiritual leader, you will have an unconscious fear built into your DNA around expressing your magic firstly, but you also have an unconscious fear around your power. And there are also two things to know here that are expansive when it comes to creating a business from your spiritual gifts. And I'm going to speak to them because they're important, but if you do struggle with the deeper witch wound, which is likely any spiritual leader, then these may also make you even more fearful. So just bear with me for now. I think I did this last episode where I talk about something and say, well, yeah, we're gonna heal this fear, but then I say something and it just kind of knocks it out the park, and it's like, oh shit, there's even more fear here now. So yeah, just bear with me. We're gonna get there. But essentially, the crucial difference that you need to know is that magical business works differently to muggle business. So there's often a real misconception for women who come into this path who may have already been very successful in the kind of more mundane muggle business world, and they're used to that kind of masculine way of creating, that kind of, well, we need something to sell, we've got our spiritual tools, that's what we're going to sell. And there's a real misconception that the spiritual tools that you have spent years training in, and this is not to deny that, because they're still a really good, really useful part of your path and your journey and what you're going to bring into the world. But there's a real misconception that your tools or your skills are your gift. And the truth is, your tools are not the gift here. They are not your purpose. Your purpose is not in Reiki. On one level, that's soothing to hear, because it means that no one really gives a shit about how good you are at Reiki or astrology or any of the other things that you've learned. And again, just to caveat that with, these skills are not useless. They form part of the route that you will guide women through. But let's get really clear on the nuance here. The real gift is you. I'm just going to pause there because it's so important. Like, women are not out there looking for the tools. They are to a degree, in terms of like, when they see that the tool is going to create a transformation, they will see the value in them. But what they're really looking for is the transformation. And you are an example of that. So it is your heroine's journey story, your story of like how you have alchemized and healed your deepest wound, that is real medicine for those who are also experiencing their own version of that deep wound. So it really is that heroine's journey that is your gift, that is your purpose, that is, in muggle terms, your niche. And there is a universal magical law that underpins my path at Archetypal Apothecary that is really a good explanation of this. Like, it sums it up. It's the law of similia similibus, and it means like yours like. And that literally means that your soul clients, who are women like you, literally are magnetized to fully expressed healers like you. So when you fully express yourself, you are going to magnetize the women that are going to resonate with your story. And like I say, on one level, that is deeply soothing for women who suffer with imposter syndrome, because like, yay, I don't even have to be that good at being spiritual. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. And no one's going to be judging my tools, therefore I can't be an imposter. But on another level, you also now have to show up as you in your full expression. And oh, hell yes, the witch wound is going to show up now, because now it's you that's the medicine. And that means it's you that needs to know that you are worthy, and not from like it's not going to come from an external place. So I did warn you at the beginning of the episode that creating a spiritual business is likely to be an initiation. I think this is a great example of how that can be the case. So the other thing to know here is that for as long as we are creating a business as a vessel to show us our worth, our worthiness, it's going to be difficult to create that business. And this is one of my biggest leadership lessons, to not get worth from my clients. And there's absolutely no wrong making here. I'm saying this with complete love for the parts of me that used to do this, and for parts of you that feel tempted to do this. Maybe even don't realise that that's what's happening. It's something we all do. Like, this is innocent. Again, it's all part of this wounding. It's something we all do from the start when we're beginning to step into feminine leadership, into the work of leading other women into spiritual healing. And again, like how this showed up for me was like, oh my goodness, you know, and this may be how it shows up for you as well. Like, did I serve her well enough? Oh my God, she's not responded to me in the last 5 seconds. Did I say something wrong? Like, I didn't sign her on the first call. I'm a failure. I wasn't good enough at enrolling. Or more recently, oh my God, she called me a cult leader. I must have done something wrong. I'm really not worthy. Okay, so perhaps the last one is just me. But this has been alive for me this week, actually, because somebody actually DM'd me and said that I was narcissistic, which has been a whole journey. I actually wasn't that triggered because I've journeyed with this before, but I think there's a really important point here, or a few actually really important points, because it's helpful to know that as a true successful leader, you've come here to lead. And this is something that I saw through this journey of, you know, receiving feedback that would make me feel like an imposter, like I wasn't good enough. And to know that you've come here to lead, and that to be a successful leader, to create a movement, means that people will not all love you, is really helpful. Like, if we look at all the great leaders of history, they lead because on some level they divide people, and those who agree and want to follow that path follow, and those who don't cancel them. And the one thing that's also something that my women deeply fear, by the way. So if you're, again, I'm probably not adding to the lack of fear here, but if it is bringing stuff up for you, that's an invitation to look here, because it's a call for love. It's a call for love for the part of you that's scared. Like, this is probably activating for our little girls' wounds. Never mind the more ancestral wounds that we carry as well. I'm digressing a little bit there. So essentially, all the great leaders lead. And the one thing you need to know about being a spiritual leader is that people will project on you. People will not all love you. People will criticize you. And again, just to speak to, like, whilst that is a projection, there's also always gold to be reclaimed in that. Like, it's important to look at where there might be even a fragment of truth in any projections. And that's something that I have journeyed with deeply this year. And at the same time, because there's always, again, this stuff comes up as material for our liberation, but it's also important to see that it is also a projection. Somebody else may be triggered and by whatever it is that we're leading, and they will be in a triggered response and projecting things onto us. That is comes with the territory of being a witchy leader. And even, I just again want to speak to this piece as well, because even loving leadership, even when it's the most deep loving leadership, it can still be triggering at times. And as I said, that means there's deep expansion available for the person being triggered if they're available to choose that. You know, I have been called by people who really understand my message and movement. I've been called a loving fast forward button to healing, but not everybody receives me like that. And despite my leadership being really loving, but the one thing that means, if we leave that to one side for a moment, because that's probably a whole other episode, the one thing that you can take from that is that because of the amount of projection that comes into leadership, is that we cannot judge our worth, our success, our skills, or our medicine on other people. And this is a really, really important thing for my women, for magical women, for women who are here to be spiritual leaders, to know, is that only we can cultivate our own worthiness. We can't look outside of it outside of ourselves for it, and we don't have to stay victim to it either. It's not a pattern we're stuck with for life. And the other piece about that is we don't have to bypass it. And I say this because often magical women will come across imposter syndrome, and the temptation that's, what's taught in the personal development world is often things like affirmations. And I'll talk a little bit more to what I mean by that. Is they'll kind of like almost try to push aside the imposter syndrome feelings and ascend. It's called the ascension model, and it's kind of what I often refer to as woo light, which isn't intrinsically light. It's just how it's interacted with. It's that kind of sense of like kind of love and light. If I affirm I'm worthy, then eventually I'll believe that kind of approach, and that's a common approach. And again, this is part of the journey that we have to go through. That's somewhere that I have been as well. And it's also the ascension model. And so don't jump on me, because I know that this can be triggering to hear, and it doesn't make it wrong. Like, it's both, but ascension is needed. But there's also like different levels of consciousness in alchemy, in true healing. And we don't need to go just all love and light and bypass the reality of imposter syndrome. We also need to descend. We need to be in our bodies. We need to be with the truth of what's beyond our block. We need to be willing to go into the darkness, into the shadow, into what is beyond the superficial surface blocks. And we need to be with the stretch, the discomfort of cultivating our own inner worthiness and healing our imposter syndrome. And it's not even by cultivating worthiness. It is, as I said, by learning to heal our witch wound. And that essentially means deconditioning this ancestral wound. And let me just pause there, because as women with a calling to spiritual leadership, you will have ancestors, whether you know of them or not. Like, it will be in your bones. And mine were spiritual energetic healers, which I found out recently, which I didn't know, and they will be ancestors who were burned at the stake. And these will be ancestors whose power was denied, which leaves that imprint in your cells, whose magic was ridiculed, leaving you not trusting your own magic, and whose full expression of their gifts had them killed, which would understandably, again, this is all innocent, leave you hiding and living in fear. Because these fears create discomfort, they create challenge, they create stretch. And without the descent, we will struggle to move through those challenges without being able to go into the truth of what is in our bones, what is in our bodies. Listen to those sensations, be with them, be honest about them. We can't heal imposter syndrome, we can't heal the witch wound, because we're so out of our bodies, we can't actually get present to the deeper fear that's lying beyond imposter syndrome. And so really what that requires is to go into the gritty witch and allow her to be a mirror, like we were talking about with the archetypal mirrors earlier. Allow her to be a mirror that shows us where we're living in our human, instead of seeing our deeper, true gifts and meaning. And when we do that, we can truly heal. We can bring the higher frequencies into the lower ones. And like kind of there's that movement between ascension and descension where the sweet spot is. And there's a real journey with deconditioning our personal imposter syndrome blocks and our ancestral shadow wounds here. And our personal imposter syndrome really kicks in when we're in our humanness as a manifestation of these deeper ancestral wounds. There's also a kinky pleasure that we get from worrying about being an imposter and not enough. It's a convenient personal story that has us not having to own our power, our magic, and our expression. And yeah, it's really essentially an innocent fear that has been embedded in ourselves that has us stay safe, because that's all fear is trying to do, is keep us safe. But there are some fears that are conditioned that aren't real threats anymore. The witches are no longer being burned at the stake for leading, for sharing their magic. It's a great privilege that that's the case these days. And yet it's this kind of imposter syndrome, this deeper witch wound underneath it. These are one of the top things that have magical spiritual women who are here to be powerful feminine leaders, not taking aligned action to lean into their gifts, thinking that their gifts are too big for them. And going back to that kinky pleasure, it's like if you're not worthy, you don't have to try. So there's a pleasure, there's a benefit to not having to try. We get to stay safe is essentially what's going on there. And I share this because it's likely coming up now. You're probably listening to this episode now because you're here to heal it. And I know the episode is here to talk about how, so I want to speak to that on some level, and also invite you into some kind of deeper inquiry and some more practical elements to work with. I know there's kind of like the magical lens is very much, you know, about being in the magic, being in the kind of ascension part of it, allowing things to unfold. There's also that deeper ascension piece of like, we're humans living in a human world and we want to be able to learn how to work with things. So practical, I'll do my best to keep it as practical as possible, but my basic answer for how to navigate imposter syndrome and heal that, so that we can bring our spiritual gifts into the world, is that we need to heal the witch wound. Those fears around power, magic, expression are the real deep fears that want healing. And I realise as I say that, it's likely not that helpful as an overview because there's another how attached to that. So I'm going to give you those more practical inquiries. And at the most basic level, there are 3 basic steps to this. I mean, there's 3 core things that I share across my whole model. There's, if you like, the compass for archetypal apothecary, i.e. if I was going to give you a compass and say head towards these 3 directions, and as long as you're healing all of those things, you're going to get to island B, which is, you know, having healed the witch wound. It's essentially the 3 things would be feminine power, ancient magic, and true expression. So those are like the compass. But on the, in terms of the inquiries, the 3 basic steps to begin this healing of the witch wound, the first thing, there's 3 things, 3 basic steps that I always begin to guide women into as we're starting this healing process. And the first is always loving inquiry. The second is making a choice whether to commit to healing it. And the third is beginning to notice and noticing practice. And there's also like deeper work as well around embodiment that I normally guide women into as well. But for now, let's stick with those 3 basic things. And I'm going to invite you into thinking around power, magic and expression, perhaps doing this for each one. Or even picking one that is the most deep fear that comes up. If you're thinking about imposter syndrome, what is the one thing that feels the most scary? Is it power? Is it magic? Is it expression? Pick that and work with that, and almost like see this as a beginning of a month-long deepening into this. So the first step is to go into inquiry, into loving inquiry. The more love that you can bring to this, the more you'll have revealed, because this is working with, layers of ourselves that have been holding it together, holding the tension, holding this wounding for our lifetime often. So we're not gonna be able to heal and reveal more without loving the parts of ourselves that are trying to keep safe. So firstly, loving inquiry is where and how does imposter syndrome show up for me? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, what is the deeper activating fear beyond it? Is it power? Is it magic? Is it expression? And you might, with that one, have to take the overall fear of imposter syndrome and maybe ask yourself deeper questions like, what if I'm not good enough? What does that mean? In order to get to that, or just generally get a sense for like, which one do I have more resistance to? Do I have resistance to power? Do I have resistance to magic? Do I have resistance to fully expressing myself? And usually you can feel in your body like which of those is the most triggering. So that's the inquiry. Once you have done that inquiry, I invite you into really going into your heart, maybe hand on heart, hand on womb space, really feeling into, like, am I devoted to healing this? Like, how important is it to heal this? Like, I think we can often say we're choosing something consciously, but we can only really choose something consciously when we fully look at the costs and benefits of something. So when you're answering that question, like, am I devoted to healing essentially the witch wound or imposter syndrome and the witch wound? Like, what ways is it going to cost me if I do heal that? What ways is it going to benefit me if I do heal that? And then flip the question around, like, what ways is it going to cost me if I don't heal that? And what are the benefits if I don't heal that? And I say costs and benefits both ways because of the kinky pleasures that I was talking to. Like, there are always kinky pleasures to us not healing something. And that's a really powerful inquiry to see what is actually really keeping you in imposter syndrome. So there's some deeper inquiry around commitment even. And once you've made your choice, and I caveat this with only if you have made the choice that you are devoted to healing that, and that choice in itself, I can't even tell you, like, it seems like that's such an innocent inquiry, but it's that deeper choice that really often starts to unfold the magic. Like, you may notice that when you have chosen that fully in your heart, stuff around imposter syndrome begins to show up. Like, either you'll have some more that's kind of a test to how devoted you are to healing it, or you'll start to notice things that are helping you see that was not actually reality. That deeper choice, the deeper devotion, the deeper commitment is one piece that really cannot be beaten in terms of the magical lens. That as much as that is like a logical linear how piece of like, this is an inquiry, go away and see how devoted you are. The magical piece is like really seeing, like, in my heart, am I going to make this deeper choice? And that's really an energetic nuance. That you can almost feel it in your chest, like that deeper, like soul level commitment is what we're talking about here. And I think it's very difficult actually for women to be able to make that level of devotion until they're really able to get an experience of true devotion. So I'm not going to talk anymore about that, but play with, that's not the right words because it's not very devotional, but the point is, like, go into the inquiry about commitment and see what comes up for you there. And then the final piece of that, so this is the third step, is to go into a noticing practice. If you are devoted to healing that, the next piece, and this is only if you are a yes to being devoted to healing that, the next piece is to notice, to begin a noticing practice in day-to-day life. Keep a list of where it shows up, where this deeper fear of power, magic or expression, or the deeper fear around imposter syndrome, where does that deeper fear show up to try and create for you? If it's a fear of your power, notice where your fear of power is stopping you from owning things powerfully. Notice where this wounding shows up for you. And again, noticing, do not underestimate the power of that tool. This is one of the most powerful tools because it will reveal more to you as you go. These can seem like really simple inquiries, but on a deeper level, they will reveal more and more if we're open to it. So again, open your heart for more to be revealed around all of this to you. You know, we're essentially channeling the witch as a remedy here. And disclaimer, this is almost like the equivalent of having a deep energetic healing if you are going into this practice. So just bear that in mind, like you're essentially choosing into working with the witch as an archetype, and she will reveal more and more to you. I said this recently to women that I was doing an avatar interview with, like even just the questions themselves were activating portals into the witch and her medicine. So the other piece that I'd invite you to do, as you've done that, is that I also invite you to get super clear on what your deeper purpose is. What's in your heart? The clearer that you can be on who you were born here to be, who your soul was born here to be, the less you will come to worry about imposter syndrome, because you will know your purpose in yourselves, and that will become more important than the fear at some point. There's like a process whereby as we get clear on our desire, on our purpose, on our mission, our vision, the more we can be in touch with that, the less the fear has a hold. Like when there's a deep, deep connection to our purpose, our vision, our mission, who we are, who we were born here to be, that becomes the deeper piece of the devotion, because there's just no other option at that point. Like that is who we're here to be. And again, that takes cultivating. Like I think actually devotion is one of my was one of my unconscious competencies. Now something I've reclaimed consciously, but it's definitely been a piece of work throughout the last 10 years, really to reclaim that. So yeah, I'm going off on a tangent again, but it's essentially, it's really important that we hold on to our vision and build our capacity to expand into our success and to hold that. And one of my mentors spoke out recently that creating our spiritual business is like learning to lean into holding the sensation, just like we do in yin yoga. If you're familiar with yin yoga is really a process. It's not like normal yoga. It's really a process of like being on our mats and meeting our soft edge and leaning into like holding the sensation in our bodies and noticing what comes up as we do that, like, and loving ourselves there and allowing ourselves to meet ourselves on the mat. And really that is what I've been talking to in this episode, is like we need to be able to meet our soft edge in our business and learn to hold the sensation until one day we've become so much more powerful, so much more magical, so much more fully expressed. And it's funny because not only had I thought about this analogy before, I think I may have even used the analogy of yin yoga before my mentor said it, but I also trained in yin yoga at the same time as he did, so that's how I knew him. So I love that he's using that analogy as well. And yeah, essentially that's how I see stepping into leadership and business creation, is that we lean into the stretch. And by the stretch here, I mean we lean into the imposter syndrome and we allow ourselves to calibrate to that level of expansion. We lean into expanding beyond our imposter syndrome and loving ourselves, holding the sensations that come up as we experience imposter syndrome, and allowing ourselves to keep moving forwards, keep taking the aligned actions. And we lean in again and we hold more and we hold more, and we lean in again and we hold more and we hold more, until we are able to hold our success, our power, our magic, our full expression much more than we ever could before. If I think about even the last 2 years of my expansion in my power, I'm just unrecognizable as a person. And that is because I kept consciously choosing to lean into that next level of stretch and to love myself in the fear of imposter syndrome and keep leaning into the next level of expansion. And that really is how we grow into knowing that we are enough, that we are worthy, that we're able to serve, just by holding the sensation of showing up and doing it and seeing that it's not going to kill us. We're actually not going to be burned at the stake for being our full expression. We're actually, able to be powerful. We're able to lead. We do have gifts. We do have medicine that the world needs. Imposter syndrome frustrates me in many ways. There's probably a trigger in there, but it frustrates me because there's so much magic in the women that are here to share their gifts, to be leaders, to lead in, the spiritual movement. There's so much magic, and this imposter syndrome, this kind of personal you that is stopping you from being the full expression of your unapologetic magic is often wins. Like there's this idea that your gifts are too big, and if you are your gift, you can't really be too big. So I'm going to leave it there, and hope you've enjoyed the episode. I would love to hear from you. Please do join our Secret Witch Society, and yeah, I'm super excited to hear what came up for you. So do share. I have been on Instagram and TikTok recently, so I'm showing more and more reels on there, leaning into the imposter syndrome. No, I'm not really feeling that so much with that one, but yeah, looking forward to hearing how this lands. Let me know what comes up for you, and I will speak to you soon. What an episode! Here are my takeaways. Imposter syndrome is a block that all aspiring spiritual leaders hit up against. You are not alone in feeling you aren't enough for your spiritual gift. This is the one block that has women struggling to take aligned action in creating a purpose-led business. It's also a manifestation of a deeper ancestral wound, the witch wound. What underlies it is fear of your power, magic, or full expression. The good thing is that it is not your tools that are your gifts, so you don't have to worry about perfecting those. And that also means that it is you that is the gift. Your story of transformation is the real medicine, so the real way to heal imposter syndrome is the inner work on your deeper wounds. We cannot judge our worth, our success, our skills, or our spiritual gifts on other people. We can only show up and serve to our best capacity, coming from love and truth. Instead, the work is to cultivate our own worthiness by descending into the deeper fears and loving ourselves in them, and also connecting to spirit and expanding into our full expression. I offered some practical inquiries and practices for this in the episode. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.